Ashes and ashwood. In the quiet village of Endagani, where red earth met open sky and huts stood like sleeping guardians, a girl named Zawadi was known not by her name, but by her pain. Orphaned at the age of 6 after a deadly fever claimed her parents, she was taken in by her late mother's cousin, Mama Najoki, a woman whose kindness ended where her own needs began. Zawadi, now 17, lived not as a daughter, but as a servant. Each morning before the cock crowed, she rose to fetch water from the well a mile away, her bare feet blistered by the stones of the path. She cleaned, cooked, fetched firewood, and received little more than a crust of ugali and sharp words in return. Yet she did not complain. Her heart, though scarred, still hoped. One market day, while balancing a basket of cassava on her head, Zawadi passed the village square and heard the elder's voice booming. "A visitor is coming," Elder Macau announced, his gray beard fluttering like a flag in the breeze. "He comes from the city, sent by a wealthy foundation. He seeks a young villager who shows true virtue, not riches, not beauty, but heart." The villagers gasped. In Endagani, such visits were rare as rain in dry season. Eyes sparkled with ambition. Daughters were quickly sent to bathe in the river, and mothers whispered to one another of how their children would be chosen. Zawadi listened from the shadow of a tree, curiosity flickering within her. She said nothing but carried her cassava to Mama Najoki. That night, under a roof of grass and a sky of stars, Zawadi sat outside the hut, grinding maize flour by hand. Her hands moved in rhythm, yet her mind wandered. What did it mean to have virtue? Would the stranger see past faces and clothes? Would he see someone like her? The next morning, the stranger arrived. He was not what they expected. Not in a suit or glasses like the government men. He wore a simple white shirt, sandals, and a wide-brimmed hat. His name was Mr. Kamau, and though he smiled, his eyes were searching. Mama Najoki made sure her own daughter, Akieng, was dressed in beads and the finest chitinge. She forced Zawadi to remain behind, scrubbing the courtyard. But fate, as always, had its own design. As Mr. Kamau toured the village, he paused by Mama Najoki's home. Akieng offered him tea sweetened beyond reason and practiced her prettiest smile. But just then, a chicken escaped the yard, flapping in chaos. Akieng shrieked and leapt away. From behind the hut, Zawadi appeared, calm and swift. She caught the bird gently, whispering soft words to calm it, then returned it to its pen. She bowed, said nothing, and turned to leave. But Mr. Kamau's eyes lingered on her. "What is your name, child?" he asked. Zawadi paused. "Zawadi, sir." "And what do you do?" "I do what must be done." He smiled at her answer. Later that day, Mr. Kamau asked Elder Macau to gather the village youths at the square. One by one, he asked them questions not about their dreams, but about their actions. What would they do if a neighbor had no food? If a stranger fell sick by the roadside? Most gave clever answers. Then came Zawadi's turn. "What would you do, Mr. Kamau asked, if someone gave you great power?" Zawadi looked at her calloused hands. "I would share it, so no one else would have to suffer as I did." A hush fell over the crowd. Even Mama Najoki looked uncertain. Mr. Kamau nodded slowly. "Thank you." That evening, Zawadi returned home expecting to be scolded. But Mama Najoki was quiet, her eyes shifting. The whole village buzzed with whispers about the poor orphan girl who caught the eye of the stranger. But Zawadi didn't let hope rise too high. She had learned not to expect much. Yet that night, as she lay on her mat beneath the creaking thatch, something new stirred in her chest. The test of thorns. The next morning, Endagani village awoke in a storm of gossip. The orphan girl. Surely not. Some whispered. She must have bewitched him, others scoffed. But deep down, even the loudest doubters knew something had shifted. Zawadi fetched water as usual, but her path was no longer invisible. Children stared openly, women lowered their voices when she passed, and Mama Najoki's scowl had deepened into a permanent crease. When she returned home, Mama Najoki was waiting, arms folded like coiled snakes. "You will not disgrace this family with your village games," she spat. "Mr. Kamau was being polite. That is all." Zawadi lowered her gaze. "Yes, Mama." But her heart told her otherwise. That afternoon, the village gathered once more in the square, where Mr. Kamau stood with Elder Macau beside him. In front of them lay a strange sight: a woven basket filled with scrolls, each tied with red thread. "These, Mr. Kamau said, are your tests. Each of you will choose one scroll and fulfill its task before sundown tomorrow. Do not return unless your task is done." The youth lined up eagerly, pulling scrolls with trembling hands. Akiang received hers and smirked confidently. When it was Zawadi's turn, she reached in silently and withdrew a scroll. She untied it. "Find the thorniest bush on the eastern hill and return with a bundle of its stems, without breaking a single one." The villagers murmured. The eastern hill was a tangled mess of brambles and thorns. No one ventured there for firewood: it was too painful, too risky. Mama Najoki laughed cruelly when she heard. "She will return with scratches and failure, if she returns at all." Zawadi did not respond. She simply tied her old shawl around her head, wrapped cloth around her hands, and began walking. The sun beat down on her back as she crossed the dry fields, her feet stirring dust clouds. When she reached the hill, the air grew still, as if the trees themselves were watching. She found the thorniest bush wide, snarling, and ancient. Thorns like knives, long and sharp. Her hands trembled. For a moment, fear crept in. But then she remembered her mother's voice from years ago: "When it hurts, don't rush. Pain teaches us patience." So, Zawadi knelt carefully and studied the bush. Every branch was wrapped in another. If she tugged blindly, she'd snap them. She needed a plan. She began to untangle the stems gently, one by one. Hours passed. Her cloth tore. Her fingers bled. But she never broke a stem. As the sun touched the horizon, she tied the stems with a fresh string she'd brought and began her walk back to the village, her bundle balanced on her head like a crown of thorns. The village gates were nearly closed when she arrived. The others had returned earlier: most had failed or chosen easier paths. Akiang had danced for elders, another boy had helped clean the school. Some even lied about completing their tasks. When Zawadi appeared, dusty, bleeding, and quiet, the crowd parted in silence. Mr. Kamau stepped forward and took the bundle. He inspected it stem by stem. Not one was broken. He looked at her hands, blistered, swollen, but steady. "You didn't complain." "No, sir." "You didn't ask for help." "No, sir." He turned to the villagers. "This is virtue." Some nodded in agreement. Others stayed silent, stunned. Zawadi turned to leave, but Mr. Kamau raised his hand. "Zawadi, you will travel with me to the city in 1 week's time. There is a scholarship waiting. A future." Gasps echoed across the square. Mama Najoki's mouth fell open. Leave the village." Someone muttered. "Yes, Mr. Kamau said firmly. She has earned it." But the announcement was not the end of Zawadi's trials. That night, someone slipped into the compound while she slept. Her bundle of belongings, the few coins she'd saved, and her walking sandals all gone. She sat in the dark, staring at the empty corner of the hut. But she did not weep. She did not scream. Instead, she stood, walked outside barefoot, and began to clean the courtyard as she always had. The orphan girl who changed the village. Fire beneath the clay. The news of Zawadi's selection spread beyond the village like wild embers on dry leaves. In nearby settlements, people spoke of the orphan girl chosen by the city man. But in Endagani, admiration mixed with envy, and admiration never lasted long among those who had never tasted humility. Mama Najoki's bitterness curdled into action. She's not even blood. She snapped to the elders over fermented millet. Who gives a child like that such honor? You all watched me raise her like a dog, and now she is your pride. Some elders looked down in shame. Others looked away. But none dared confront Mama Najoki's venom. Not then. Inside the hut, Zawadi continued to prepare. Her possessions were few. A worn-out dress, an old scarf, a torn Bible left by her mother, and her spirit. Mr. Kamau had promised to return in 3 days with travel arrangements, and Zawadi knew she had to be ready even if she lacked shoes, even if her bag had been stolen. On the second night, as the moon rose high and silence blanketed the village, Zawadi awoke to the sound of footsteps. She rose quietly, peering through the thin curtain that hung in the doorway. Akieng. Her foster sister crept into the compound with a small clay pot of ash and broken twigs, symbols of a curse. Zawadi stepped into the moonlight. "What are you doing, Akieng?" Startled, Akieng froze. "You think you're better than us now?" she hissed. "Just because one man saw you working like a donkey." "I never said that," Zawadi replied softly. "You stole my chance. Mama said I was the chosen one. The village laughed at her when they picked you." Zawadi stepped closer. "You never wanted the burden. Just the blessing." Akieng's face twisted, but she turned and ran into the night, leaving the pot behind. Zawadi stared at it. Ash and twigs meant to bring misfortune, to drive her away. But she was no longer a girl of fear. She picked it up, walked to the field, and scattered it into the wind. The next day, Mr. Kamau returned. But he was not smiling. "I've received a letter," he said to her quietly. "Someone from your village accused you of theft. They claim you manipulated me." Zawadi's heart dropped. "But I've seen your work, your wounds, your silence. I know the truth," he continued. "Still, I must give the city office something in your defense." Zawadi nodded slowly. "Come with me." She led him through the village, past the school whose walls she'd helped patch, past the stream she'd cleared last year of debris. They reached the elders' hut, where she greeted each man with respect. Then she did something unexpected. She knelt before them. "I ask only this," she said. "Tell him the truth. If I have done wrong, say it now. If I have lived as a thief, show proof. But if not, then let my future be mine." Silence followed. The elders shifted, ashamed. Finally, old Elder Macau stood. "We have watched her from afar and let her suffer," he said. "We owe her honesty now." One by one, the elders spoke of her kindness, her work, her perseverance. Even some mothers came forward, telling of how Zawadi had helped with their children, fetched herbs for the sick, and offered her food to those who had none. Mr. Kamau listened. When they were done, he turned to Zawadi. "The city will hear the truth." That night, Mama Najoki locked the hut. "You will not go," she growled. "You are nothing without me." Zawadi said nothing. In the early hours, with only the stars to witness her, she slipped out barefoot, carrying her bundle, and walked toward the village gate. There stood Elder Macau, holding a new pair of sandals and a small travel bag. "You may have been born orphaned, child," he said, placing them in her hands, "but today, this village gives you a name that matters, our daughter." Zawadi wept then for the first time in years. And when she climbed into Mr. Kamau's old van the next morning, the whole village watched her leave. Some cheered. Others remained cold. The orphan girl who changed the village. The girl who returned with rain. The city was a land of noise and motion. Cars roared, lights blinked even at midnight, and buildings rose like giants competing with the sky. For Zawadi, who had never lived beyond the clay huts of Endagani, everything felt foreign. But she did not cower. She learned to read better, speak confidently, and navigate streets with courage. Under the care of Mr. Kamau's foundation, she attended one of the city's best learning centers where students wore uniforms and spoke English like they owned it. Zawadi didn't own it yet, but she earned it day by day. When asked to introduce herself, she would smile shyly and say, "I am Zawadi from the village of Endagani. I was raised by fire, but I did not burn." Years passed. She excelled. Her story spread again, this time in newspapers and on radio. The orphan girl who rose from thorns, they called her. She became a symbol of possibility, not just in the city, but across the counties. At 23, Zawadi was offered a permanent position in the foundation to manage rural empowerment projects. Her first request stunned Mr. Kamau. "I want to return to Endagani," she said. "Not to stay but to plant seeds where the earth was once too dry." He agreed, smiling. "Go. Let them see what became of the girl they tried to bury." Zawadi returned not with fanfare, but with purpose. She wore a simple green dress, no makeup, and carried files and blueprints in her bag. She arrived during planting season, just as the land cried for rain. Endagani had changed little. Children still ran barefoot, and the huts stood weary. Yet when she walked through the dusty road, silence fell. People peeked from behind banana trees. Some dropped what they carried. It was not the silence of hate. It was the silence of guilt. Elder Macau welcomed her with open arms. "Welcome home, daughter," he said, voice cracked with age. Zawadi smiled. "It is no longer my home, but it is where my roots began." She announced her mission. The foundation would build a school, dig boreholes, and start a women's cooperative for farming. But there was one condition. "All must be welcome," she said. "Even those who wronged me." Murmurs spread. When Mama Najoki heard, she fell ill with shame. Akieng, now a mother herself, came forward that evening. "You still remember us?" she asked, eyes downcast. "I remember everything," Zawadi said. "But forgiveness waters the heart better than revenge." And so, the work began. Brick by brick, the village transformed. Children who once mocked Zawadi now sat at desks, pencils in hand. Women who had sneered now led the cooperative she founded. Men learned new farming methods from the workshops she sponsored. And then, as if the heavens themselves had waited for her to return, the rain came. Heavy, generous, and life-giving. Crops sprouted, rivers flowed again, and hope was no longer a visitor, it became a resident. On the final evening of her stay, the villagers gathered for a feast in her honor. Drums beat, fires danced, and Elder Macau raised a calabash in her name. "From ashes to honor," he said. "From thorns to crown." Zawadi stood, tears shining in her eyes. "I am not special," she said. "I simply refused to believe that suffering was the end. I chose not to break. And now, I choose to give." The village cheered not for a savior, but for a sister who had found her way and brought light with her. As she boarded her van the next morning, a small girl ran up to her and asked, "Will you come again?" Zawadi knelt and kissed the child's forehead. "I will return every time you remember who you are. Every time you believe that you, too, can change the world." The van drove off, leaving behind dusty tracks and blooming hearts. And Endagani, once a village of silence and struggle, became the village where hope lived because one orphan girl chose to return with rain. The end.